Assalamualaikum and hello everyone. My name is Hylmee Matahir and today I will be presenting our study title, A Gamification Approach in Teaching Public Finance. This presentation is based on our work on using a Monopoly-inspired board game called Fiscalopoly as an innovative teaching tool in the public finance classroom. The main questions behind this study is very simple. Can a game-based learning approach improve students' engagement, understanding, and academic performance in public finance? In this presentation, I will briefly walk through the background of the study, the research objective, the methodology, the main findings, and finally the conclusion and recommendation. Here is the flow of my presentation. First, I will explain the background of the study and why this research was needed. Then I will move to the research objectives. After that, I will give a brief snapshot of the literature review, followed by the research methodology. Next, I will present the findings, both in terms of student experience and academic performance. Finally, I will end with the conclusions and recommendations. So let me begin with the background. One of the main challenges in teaching public finance is that the subject can feel very abstract to students. Students may be able to memorize definitions, but they often struggle to connect the theories to real fiscal decisions in the real world. For example, concepts such as taxation, government spending, public goods, subsidies, and externalities are important, but they can be difficult to visualize if the learning process is too passive. Because of that, the study introduced a gamification approach. The idea is that when students learn through a game, they are not just listening. They are actively making decisions, discussing with teammates, solving problems, and experiencing the consequences of those decisions. That is where Fiscalopoly comes in. It is a board game designed specifically for public finance learning. So, the main objective of this study was to examine whether this customized game could help improve students' understanding, engagement, and decision-making skills in the public finance course. In other words, the study wanted to see whether learning could become more meaningful when students experience public finance in a more interactive way. Let us look briefly at the literature. The existing literature generally supports the use of gamification in education. Many previous studies have shown that when game elements are integrated into learning, students tend to become more motivated and more satisfied with the learning process. Gamified learning also encourages more active participation. Instead of receiving information passively, students interact with each other, think strategically, and apply concepts in the practical setting. Another important point from the literature is that educational games are often associated with better learning outcomes, including improved understanding and sometimes better assessment performance compared to traditional lecture-only methods. So this study builds on that literature, but with a specific contribution. Instead of using a general game, we designed a Monopoly-inspired board game that is directly connected to public finance topics such as taxation, government expenditure, public goods, externalities, and fiscal policy situations. That makes the study more relevant because the game is not just entertaining, but also academically targeted. So next is the research methodology. This study used an exploratory mixed method classroom action research approach. In simple terms, that means the researchers were not relying on only one type of data. They combined classroom observation, student feedback, group reflections, and comparison of academic performance. The study involved 16 fifth semester business economics students and They were divided into 4 groups during the public finance course at UITM Sabah. To evaluate the effectiveness of the game, several forms of data were collected. This included classroom observations during gameplay, a structured survey after the game session, reflective group discussions, and a comparison of examination performance between semesters. Now, in terms of the game design itself, Fiscalopoly included several interesting mechanics. Students had to manage private funds and also think about the public fund. They encountered policy cuts, corporate social responsibilities or CSR cuts, taxes, subsidies, and service-related payments. There were also decision cut questions, where wrong decision could lead to penalties, just like real-world policy mistakes can have consequences. So the learning process was structured in stages. First, students were briefed on the rules and objectives. Then they played the game and made fiscal decisions as a team. And finally, there was a debriefing session followed by survey and discussion. This is important because the debriefing stage helps students connect the game experience back to the actual public finance concept. Now I will move to the findings, starting with student experience. Overall, the feedback was very positive. First, all students agreed that the game was easy to follow, which is important because if the game is too complicated, the learning objective can be lost. Second, 14 out of 16 students gave high ratings, meaning a score of 4 or 5, for aspects such as realism, critical thinking, and fairness. This suggests that students did not see the game as just a fun activity, but as something that reflected real decision making and encouraged deeper thinking. Another interesting finding is that the topics students found easiest to understand through the game were public goods and externalities. This makes sense because those topics are often easier to grasp when students can actually experience trade-off, shared resources, and consequences through gameplay. So from the student's perspective, Piscalopoly seems to have created a more engaging and clearer learning environment. Besides student perceptions, the study also looked at academic performance. One of the most striking findings is the increase in the share of students receiving grade A. The proportions increased from 13% to 65% after the intervention. This is quite a strong improvement. It suggests that the cohort exposed to the gamified approach performed better overall, especially in the higher grade categories. The paper interprets this shift as a sign that Fiscalopoly may have strengthened students' engagement with the course content and helped students understanding the material more effectively. At the same time, it is also important to remain careful in interpreting the results. The study mentions that one F grade in 2025 was linked more to attendance issues rather than weak academic ability. So overall, the performance data support the student feedback. The game was not only enjoyable, but it also appears to have had a positive academic effect. To conclude, this study suggests that Fiscalopoly is a promising teaching innovation for public finance. The game appears to improve student interest, interaction, critical thinking, and possibly academic performance. It helps transform a theory-heavy subject into something more active, collaborative, and applied. Based on the findings, the paper offers several recommendations. First, the game could be digitized so that it can also be used in online or hybrid learning environments. Second, It could be introduced to other academic programs that also teach public finance related topics. Third, the content of the board could be expanded beyond Sabah to reflect a broader Malaysian context. However, the study also reminds us to be realistic about its limitations. The sample size was small and the study focused on only one course and one group of students. So, while the results are encouraging, they should still be treated as exploratory evidence rather than final proof. Overall, the key message of this presentation is that gamification, when carefully designed, can be more than just a teaching trend. It can be a practical and meaningful strategy to make public finance more understandable and more engaging for students. Thank you, everyone. I hope this study highlights the potential of creative classroom strategies in economics education.